Hi, I'm Dave Henry. You're in my shop, and I'm glad you're here. Mouth Joinery has tremendous potential for easy, high-quality, do-it-yourself wooden projects, as I've said quite a few times before. In a recent video, I showed how to build this 12-sided bowl using tapered staves. And I also showed photos of a number of related projects, including this 8-sided bowl. Today I'm going to show in detail how to build this 8-sided bowl and how it differs significantly from the 12-sided build that you've seen already. And along the way we'll build a new 8-sided bowl, hopefully better than this one. These two bowls differ very importantly in a way that may not be obvious, and it is not the number of sides. Both use a mix of straight and tapered staves. That is, here's a tapered stave, here's a straight stave, straight, taper. But the 8-sided bowl uses much more taper than the 12-side. This is 6-degree taper, this is 30-degree taper. And the amount of taper affects how we do the project, adding a few extra steps. Fortunately, these are easy to do. The problem we have run into is the increasingly poor fit of the Mouth Joinery as we increase the taper. That tight, snap-into-place fit we expect from BMJ with straight staves doesn't work as well with tapered staves. I've set up a demo to show what I mean. This is a series of staves with increasing tapers from 0, which is a straight stave, on up to 30 degrees. And this is a series of model 8-sided BMJ vessels using these increasingly tapered staves. These models are taped together, but they're not glued. When I talk about angle of taper, I'm really talking about the size of the wedge, the angle of the wedge, that is here, that I've cut off each side of a square stave in order to get the tapered stave. That's a 5-degree one, of course, and there's a 17-degree cutoff. Each of these staves is the same width at the top, even though that 30-degree one doesn't really look like it. Here is the non-tapered example, which has, as expected, very tight joints. There is no flex as the vessel is squeezed. The tape would have to tear for that to happen. However, the fit gets seriously poorer and less rigid as we introduce increasing taper. At 5-degree taper, the deviation is barely detectable and joint quality is still acceptable, to my eye at least. However, by 10 degrees, gaps are visible in the joints and flex is obvious. The fit is not really acceptable. And at 17 degrees, the fit is very poor. At 30 degrees, the joints are extremely sloppy and entirely useless. Interestingly, the taper for the 8-sided bowl I showed you is 30 degrees. And my message for today is that this taper problem can be fixed. A tight fit can be restored by using compound tapers, most easily cut with a compound miter saw. A little more work, but easy to do. Okay, let's see how that works. We're going to build our new 8-sided bowl from 2 woods, an import, Peruvian walnut, and a local species. This is privet, salvaged from our backyard. I have already cut the stock to basic size. The walnut is 4 inches wide and 1/2 inch thick, and the privet 3 inches wide and 1/2 inch thick. I have already sanded all the flat surfaces to 220 grit. Okay, first thing we'll do is to cut 4 tapered staves from the walnut. Okay, let's set the 30-degree taper. Then we'll add 9 degrees of tilt, so we now have the compound taper that we need. The setting of 9 degrees came from measuring the angular gaps in 30-degree taper models, just like the one I showed you a few minutes ago. Cutting the staves is very quick once we have the right settings. The geometry of the pieces allows them to be cut continuously. They are cut to 7.5 inches on that longest dimension. Here you can see the 9-degree compound angle we've used. And here are the full staves. Okay, our next task is to route the BMJ V-grooves into both sides of our privet stock using the 8-side bit. The approximate router settings are height 1/8 inch and depth 3/8 inch. And there's the complete BMJ cuts. Okay, our next step is to cut our routed stock into 4 straight staves. The length of the staves will be 4 5/8 inches, the length of the tapered edge of the walnut staves that we just cut. Here's both sets of staves, and here's the way they will fit together for making the bowl. However, there are 3 important things to deal with before actually assembling it. First, the tapered staves can now go into the bowl in only one way. The compound taper we inserted locked their inside and outside faces into place, and that means that you can't turn this one over and put it in. It won't fit, even though the sides do look very similar. This is the outside of the bowl that you're looking at. My second point requires a close-up of 2 staves taped together to show what's going on. We'll be taking a close look at this joint right here. Here is a close-up showing what's going on with 2 staves taped together. The edge of the tapered stave, that's this right here, fits flat against the wide face of the straight stave, that's here, to give most of the desired tight glue joint. However, because we've added that extra 9-degree compound taper, this tapered edge of the walnut stave is no longer square. And BMJ bits only cut square 90-degree grooves. This leaves us with an angular gap right in here between the narrow face of the V-groove and the tapered stave. What to do? Fortunately, that problem is quickly remedied with a few strokes of a block plane or a sanding block. Basically, what we are doing is re-squaring the edge of the tapered stave by removing just a smidge of wood. That will be right here off of this corner. The width of this adjustment cut is just about the same as the width of the narrow face of the V-groove, so we're not taking much wood off at all. Here's the trim on the tapered stave, and here's what it looks like after the adjustment. The bird mouth joinery is now tight, just like with untapered staves. But we've created the need to deal with a third problem. And that is the fact that making this first adjustment in effect made the tapered stave thinner by a very small amount, around 1/64 of an inch or so. When we cut that corner off, this end got just a little bit thinner. And the problem is that the straight stave, this one, now projects out just a bit above the tapered stave, as you can see here. Happily, we can fix that too by using the block plane again, this time on the straight staves, much like we just did. What we're doing is effectively thinning the straight staves to match the thickness of the tapered staves. That's important because the result is to optimize tightening the BMJ joints during the subsequent taped glue-up and assembly. Here is the straight stave trim. Each of the 8 BMJ joints requires these 2 corrections. It goes very quickly. This is what the joint looks like with both adjustments in place. Okay, now we can tape all of the staves together for a dry fitting, being sure that they are tightly fitted to each other and that the bottom edges are carefully aligned. The tape is used for its clamping action as well as for aligning the parts, so I'm adding an extra layer to increase clamping strength. Now for the big moment. Bending the assembly into its final bowl shape. Be sure that all joints have snapped into place before taping the assembly closed. Everything looks pretty good. Before going on to the glue-up step, make sure that all joints can be fully seated. Here's one of those joints in the assembled bowl. Okay, let's move on to the glue-up. First, we open this thing up. And turn it over. We're now looking at the inside of the bowl, of course. And I should say at this point, it probably won't be necessary to redo most of the tape. If all of the joints were well fitted in the original taping, it will be fine for the glue-up. Before starting the glue-up, here's a close-up showing what those block plane edge adjustments to the tapered staves look like. Try to avoid excess glue where it will squeeze out into the inside of the bowl. It's a lot harder to tidy up unwanted glue on the inside after assembly. Let's speed this up a little bit. It's worth the trouble to carefully fit that last joint and to check that the other 7 joints are correctly seated. Okay, here's what we've got after the glue has set and the tape is removed. Joints all look good, and now we can start on the bottom of the bowl. There are at least 2 ways to attach a bottom to these bowls. Most simply, sand the bottom flat using a random orbital sander, or possibly a drum sander if you've got one big enough. Then you just glue on the roughly shaped bottom and then go back at it with the sander until everything looks just the way you want it. This method works well, especially with the drum sander. That assures an almost perfect flatness to fit the bottom to. I used this method but with the hand sander on the example bowl that I showed earlier. And here is the seam that this method leaves. However, I will use a second method for this bowl, cutting a rabbet around the inside bottom edge of the bowl and dropping a shaped bottom piece into place. I like the appearance given by this method a bit better, but some extra care is required to accommodate the highly sloped sides of the bowl while cutting that rabbet. First, take down any high spots on the bottom edge of the bowl that would cause the bowl to rock while the rabbet is being cut on the router table. A very light touch with the sander is usually enough. While this doesn't have to be absolutely flat, the flatter it is, the better the fit of the inserted bottom. The bit is set to cut a 1/8 inch wide rabbet to 1/4 inch deep. 1/8 inch may seem a bit narrow, but the width is restricted due to the sloped sides of the bowl. This effectively narrows the width of base available for routing. However, 1/8 inch is ample if the base is cut to size with reasonable care. As you can see clearly in this initial cut, the bearing on the rabbet bit leaves a shallow dent near the lower inside edge of the bowl where it makes contact. I will sand this smooth before installing the base. Okay, here is our rabbet, and what we're going to do is use this inner edge of the rabbet to trace the shape of the bottom onto this bottom piece. This bottom is of privet and is 8 inches square by 1/4 inch thick. I have taped the bottom piece to the bottom of the bowl to keep it from skittering around while I trace the bottom outline. That annoying cupping of the bottom piece that you saw a moment ago happened during a period of very hot, dry weather. Fortunately, it largely reversed when higher humidity returned. Okay, and there's what it looks like. I'll cut that out on the bandsaw just a little bit oversized so it can be shaped to fit exactly. Okay, here is the roughly cut base. I will shape it to fit into the rabbeted space using the disc sander and also a bit of hand sanding. It'll take quite a bit of back and forth cut and try fitting to get it to drop properly into the opening. here's the final fit. Not perfect, but we only get one chance at it. Before gluing in the bottom, I'll sand off those marks left by the rabbit bit. Now for the glue up. As always, be careful applying the glue. Try to avoid excess that will squeeze out into the interior of the bowl. I'm using a heavy weight to hold the bottom in place during glue up. Okay, here is the fully glued up bowl. There are 3 final construction steps left in this project, and all 3 of them are sandpapering, basically. First, we will sand the bottom flat. That is to get rid of this little rim that's left from the rabbiting step. It's a bit uneven and needs to go. Then we'll shape the top edge of the bowl. The shape of the top edge is a matter of preference, and it isn't difficult to simply round it off. And that gives a very nice look. However, I prefer to have a flat edge, like so. That maintains the faceted look of the BMJ construction, and of course, I like that. Third, we are going to sand the exterior of the bowl. We've been ignoring it pretty much so far, and it's picked up a lot of glue and marks and scratches and such, and it's time to prepare that exterior for the final finish. I'm going to do all of these tasks with my random orbital sander, and I'm going to do most of them off camera. So, sanding is all done, and here's the bowl ready for the final finish. My fitting job on the bottom was not very good, but fortunately that's on the bottom. It doesn't show very much. For the final finish, I'm going to use a single sprayed-on shellac undercoat, followed by 3 coats of a wipe-on oil polyurethane. Undoubtedly, many other finishes would give a good result too. I'll do the finishing off camera. And here's the moment we've all been waiting for, the completed bowl. I hope you like it. I'll close the video with close-ups of the bowl so you have a better idea what it looks like in detail. Thanks for watching.